This is the Welford Road Cemetery in Leicester, and immediately you notice the cemetery has been got at. Lots of the stones have been removed and they've sort of tried to make it into a park-like environment. That means we've lost a lot of the important inscriptions. What they haven't cleared away, of course, is the war graves. And these stand out quite clearly in those rectangular white stones. And there's also a large white memorial down there, which I suspect is the war memorial. We'll walk down there and have a look. This is for Ellen Outram Mann, but also mentions the memory of Flight Lieutenant John Outram Davis, RAF, great-grandson of the above, who gave his life in action over Karlsruhe, Germany, on the night of February the 2nd, 1945. He was just 24 years old. I'm afraid along here we've had some health and safety activity, I suspect, where these stones are being laid over on their backs. It might be vandalism, but one suspects it's the H&S Brigade. The name is Sidney James Carnell, and a bit higher we have Samuel John Lilly, but what caught my eye was on top of this monument is clearly some luggage with straps around it and a handle. Why is it that some councils, some authorities look after their cemeteries and they don't go into the activity of pushing stones over? They give you clear warnings that they may be dangerous and stay clear, and in no way should you let your children play in a graveyard. But other councils just set about vandalising them, like this one. Partway down we learn about Norman Kelvin, Sergeant Pilot, Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve, only son of Horace Winter and Annie Bott, killed on active service 1940, aged 20 years. There's another war casualty mentioned on this stone. Sidney J.B. Phipps, Royal Engineers, their eldest son, who died from wounds in France 1918, aged 36, buried at Dermancourt. It was normal that they were buried in a graveyard close to where they fell. Bodies, officers and men, were not returned home. Well, this is the war memorial that we saw from a distance earlier. I'm looking at the names on here and I reckon there's around 140 names and regiments listed on this memorial. Let me show you panel 4, starting with Rifleman W. Dunn of the City of London Rifles. And beneath that we have an Australian, Private F.J. Dyer. And then the 7th panel, just one taken at random, Private G. Longdon, age 24, Private A. Love, 27, Private F. McConnell, 25. And so we go right the way down, these brave men that never lived to be old men. Just in front of that we have this cross, and this is in remembrance of the heroic Belgian soldiers. And there are a list of, I guess these are names on the stone, and then it says, and the Belgian refugees who passed away in this town and county during the Great European War. Close by are a number of the individual memorials. I've picked two: Private W.H. Harrison, Leicestershire Regiment, 1918, aged 25. And directly behind him, A.J. Holmes, Ordinary Seaman, Royal Navy, HMS St George, 1915, age 19. Well, it's lost any character it once had, this graveyard, with this project of clearance. I suspect the ground is pretty unstable because a lot of the stones are tilting and sinking in. But the clearances have just sort of made it fairly characterless, sadly. A pair of larger stones which are still allowed to stand upright. Frances England, beloved wife of Israel Stimpson, 1949. And then Ada Harriet, beloved wife of Albert Stimpson. And then Sarah Ann, the beloved wife of Benjamin A. Stimpson. And then Lily, the wife of Percy T. Stimpson. And then there's Israel at the bottom. And a couple more of the men on the base. Now when we go across to the adjourning stone, it is also the same family. Mary Hayward, the beloved wife of Laban Stimpson. Mary, the beloved wife of Laban Stimpson, so he seems to have married two Marys. And then he died in 1946. And we've got a couple of other names at the base there. Well, this stone has a large blank area at the top for the names of the parents, but they never got put on here. Below it mentions William Ernest, the son of Thomas Henry and Lydia Wood, who was drowned 1906, aged 10 years. And then also Albert William, who was drowned in 1912, aged 3 years and 10 months. That sounds like two of their children who drowned. And the space was left for them to go into the grave and on the memorial, but it never happened. Here we have a former mayor of Nuneaton, William Taylor Bates, JP, 1924, aged 75. And then his wife, Charlotte Marie Christine, 1928, and other members of their family below. That's a nice bit of stone because it's very smooth and hasn't attracted any of the usual growth. And apart from the ivy, which could be easily pulled back, it's as good as the day it was made. A solid piece of black polished marble. There's a nice wreath with the letter H at the top. That's for the surname of Harding. And we come down, Arthur, known as Billy, the beloved husband of Ellen Harding, and Ellen Harding, Arthur Eric Harding, Marion Harding, Cedric Harding. But the puzzling bit at the bottom: in gratitude for many kindnesses received from the tenants of the LB and MC. And I have no idea what the LB and MC Co was or is. If you do know, it'd be good if you could post it in the comments. But a nice memorial, well preserved, easy to read. This one, standing alone, Private W.P. Meakin, the Parachute Regiment, Army Air Corps, 1945. A very simple one in a modern style. At the top we read John Douglas Swales, 1935-2000, husband, father, academic and physician. That is so simple and so distinctive. And quite elaborate carving at the top of this stone, with curtains tied back and a flower in the centre. This is Sarah, the wife of Joseph Edwards, 1899, age 72. And then beneath that we have Joseph and another name. But very nicely done. This one to William Ely, for 20 years Chief of Leicester Fire Brigade. Died 1912, age 60. And then Elizabeth, his wife, and a few other names beneath. This stone has been recently redone. It's Alice Hawkins, 1863 to 1946, a loving wife and mother, leader of the women's suffrage movement in Leicester. And at the bottom, a sister of freedom. A very tall one, standing upright beside the path, one of the tallest in the graveyard. And this commemorates William Kirk Eames, 1870, aged 73. Sadly though, no mention of what he did, what his contribution was, what his profession was. Just a very large monument to him and his family. And another elaborate and expensive memorial, and again with the same problem, just a name and a date. We know nothing more about them. Reads on the base, Lizzie, the faithful and devoted wife of William Roger Tomlin, who died suddenly 1874, aged 27. At the top end of the graveyard, the memorials are larger and more impressive. This tall one, for instance, the inscription could be so much more. Arthur, only son of Thomas and Emma Smith, who died after a short but painful illness. A very solid and elaborate horizontal tomb here. I'm going to have to stand on it to give you the inscription, but I'm sure the occupant won't mind too much. And this is to an important man in the history of Leicester, Josiah Gimson. He had a very large manufacturing works, the Vulcan Works, in the city, and they produced large engines for pumping works. And he was also a leading secularist and was responsible for some of the buildings in the city of Leicester. So this is his tomb, and the various members of his family are listed on it. It's a great shame that to have to read the dates you have to climb onto the tomb, but there we are, we've recorded them. A little difficult to get to this stone. I'm having to reach between two other large ones. But I noticed it mentions R. Scott Green of the Leicestershire Regiment. He fell at the Hohenzollern Redoubt in the First World War. He was just aged 20. Well, I've walked up to the top of the cemetery, and this is where the main entrance is. I came in at a little side entrance done by Leicestershire University, and up here we've got some very large memorials, and they haven't been pushing them over. They're all standing upright, looking rather splendid. One here in a very dark grey stone, almost a black stone. It's Arthur Wakeley, JP, 1931. What caught my eye though was the figure carved on the side here. It's an angel, but it's just done a little differently. And here, an example of what makes a stone a little more interesting. Part way down, Charles Liversley Shipp died in hospital at Zittale, Saxony after a motor accident. 1923, aged 29 years. It tells a little story which makes the whole thing much more interesting. A very grand looking angel here, her right arm raised and her left arm embracing a cross with some flowers around it. Very nicely done. And the inscription is the loving memory of Gertrude, the wife of Ernest Danson, 1925. Grand, well-lettered monument, and this remembers one of the Lord Mayors of the city of Leicester, Arthur Hawkes, 1932 to 1933. Various members of his family. On this dark stone we have another mayor of Leicester, 1898 to 1899. This is George Clifton. This one to Private Harry Wales, killed in action, aged 35 years. Buried at Comicourt in France, where he fell. The memorial for William Iseln has the Freemason insignia at the top, the compass and the square. He died in 1931. An unusual but detailed design. We have I think it's a lady with a scroll sat in front of the cross, the peace dove with the olive branch, the curtains pulled aside. At the bottom it says William Archibald, the husband of Elizabeth Jennings, 1921. And there's a space underneath, probably for Elizabeth, which has never been added. On to the aristocracy with their coat of arms on the top of the stone. And further down it tells us Sarah, the wife of Sir Samuel Fair, died 1925, and then Sam himself, 1931. A rather different way of doing things. The angel is a freestanding figure, probably in real life about 6 foot tall, and stands in front of the memorial to Sarah Ann Palmer Cox, the wife of John Thomas Cox, and then John himself. This very large memorial. This is James Leavesley, a pioneer of Churches of Christ in Leicester. A life consecrated to the service of God. 1918. I'll show you this one. I just liked what it said on here. The second one down. Agnes Ann Fletcher, a wonderful woman. That's rather a nice thing to say about somebody. Well, this top part of the cemetery is much more interesting, much more worth exploring. I entered by the bottom gate and found a deserted, forlorn area and wasn't impressed. But if you come in the main entrance, I think you'll enjoy yourself here exploring these memorials. There's some really good ones here. Well, further up still, where apparently an old chapel stood, they've renovated the area and put down 100 plaques, these shiny stainless steel plaques you can see in front of us. And these are famous people who are buried somewhere in the churchyard here. They may not have a memorial in the churchyard, but they're listed on these plaques. I'll show you one or two, just taken at random. Reverend George Legge, born in Aberdeen, Doctor of Laws, radical minister at Gallowtree Gate Independent Chapel for 25 years. James Leavesley, boot and shoe manufacturer of Leavesley and North, town councillor and instrumental in building one of the churches. E. Meadows and W. Joyce, who in 1898 were in a railway accident and driver and fireman died. George Henry Quinn, a private in the 1st Battalion Northants Regiment, fought and killed in famous last stand at Saransar, northwest frontier, during the Tara campaign. Now, if you were a resident of Leicester, these would be absolutely fascinating. I can see myself really getting to grips with these and knowing more about the people. Certainly worth spending time here if you have an interest in Leicester. Well, that's my visit to Welford Road Cemetery in Leicester. It is worth coming to. I can recommend it. I've not had a chance to really explore it as well as I'd like to. I'll probably make a comeback visit here sometime. Anyway, I've enjoyed it, so till the next time.